Rupin, you are on record as saying short term profit cannot come at the cost of people and the planet. Now, that is something I agree with my whole heart, but how do we start to convince executives to move from a short term outlook to one that takes a longer view?
Uh, Michael, you're right. I have been on record and multiple times. I probably am a broken record that keeps saying short-term profit cannot come at the cost of either people, equity, their well-being, or the planet as we intend to live for our future generations.
Mm.
And somewhere that also comes from my own personal belief. You can call it my ikigai, you can call it my personal purpose, but
Mm.
I want to be part of building businesses our conscience can live with. And if you look at the last, I think 4 or 5 odd decades, we've been heavily influenced by this free market thinking where we've started using financial income as a proxy for success. And
Mm.
therefore, the world we've created assumes, whether you look at it as a economic government view like GDP or a firm business view like profit. And the assumption is whether through GDP or whether through profit, uh, organizations or governments need to exist to maximize those. And while rational, self interested individuals, we will express our preference through consumer choices and maximize our income so that we can continue to express those choices. And just like a servant cannot serve two masters, business has been prioritized uh,
Mm.
to put their financial income, and I'm using the word financial income, not even profit, but
Mm.
financial income over the needs of society. So the general underlying assumption over the last 4 or 5 decades has been that let's ignore external social or environmental costs. So yeah, if our business causes pollution, we can assume somebody else will take care of it. Or our
Mm.
business generates gender inequity, somebody else will take care of it. Or we can do some CSR or some other stuff, but our center of gravity business has been operating where nature and society are assumed to be infinite, are assumed to
Mm.
be stable, are assumed to be resources, are assumed to be used and abused, extracted from without having its responsibility from it. And what that does is we, I mean, again, not my words, science tells us that the world we are in today, and more importantly, the one we look to be leaving behind for our future generation, cannot be more fragile than in our entire existence. Okay, so there is a, for any company, there is a belief system fight between Friedman and Freeman. I mean, Milton
Mm.
Friedman, in his wonderful 1971 article in New York Times, propounded saying the only social responsibility a company has is to maximize profit for its shareholders.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what I just spoke about for the last 5 decades is is a following of the Milton Friedman era. But at the same time, Edward Freeman, who's known as the father of multi-stakeholder theory, said, look, I believe a company should consider the impact of its actions on all stakeholders. So the starting point of trying to convince any executive of any business, and not just stopping there, not just executives of business, but also executives who are part of governance, whether they be at a company, whether they be as part of government, is which side of the fence between Friedman and Freeman do you want your business to operate in? Do you consider the society that contributes to your business as a stakeholder? Do you contribute the planet that you extract water, energy
Mm.
from as a stakeholder? And do you, as a business, only consider return on financial capital? Or do you go beyond that to consider return on societal capital, return on employee engagement capital, return on planetary capital? Because if you put that science of paying the planet for the resources we extract, most businesses as they exist today will not be profitable. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen science which also shows a lot of oil and gas companies wouldn't be profitable if they had to pay a fair share of what they extract from nature. So
Mm-hmm.
somewhere we've built, I mean, if you were a movie buff and you'd seen this movie, I think it's about 20, 30 years ago. So I'm showing off my age, unfortunately. But if you looked at this movie called The Truman Show,
Oh yeah.
okay, where everything was created for one human called Truman, and everything else was fake, and everything else followed a certain principle, and everybody else was acting a part. So, somewhere over the last 5 decades, we're all living in a Truman Show where we believe human capital, societal capital, employee capital, natural capital can be infinite, can be extractive, don't have to be paid for. And unless our measurements of success move away from this view, we will not move away from short-term profit coming at the cost of either people and or the planet.